All right. Is that one? Oh yeah, there's one over there. So with agreement, we're talking mostly about plurals and how to actually, all of them are plurals, yeah. And how to tell if the verb should be plural or if the verb should be singular. And this is something that, like, the first rule is something that you learn when you are a baby. It's like a part of language acquisition. You just sort of naturally learn how to change verbs into plural or not plural. So, but sometimes it gets more complicated than that when you have multiple subjects and you're trying to decide, and one subject's plural, one subject singular maybe, and you're trying to decide then how to format the verb. And if we're thinking about like ACT prep, because a lot of this grammar stuff will come in handy when you take the ACT, this is something that they test you on all the time to make sure that you know how to do agreement. So rule number one, this is the one that you learn as a baby. Subject and verb must agree with each other. So if you have a plural subject, you should also have a plural verb. So you could have something like, the child plays at the park. Okay, the child is the subject. That is the person who is acting in that sentence, right? And the thing they are doing is playing. And so because you only have one child, you would have an S at the end of the verb. Child plays. And all of you guys would say it naturally that way. That's example A. Add in another example too if you have space. This is when it is plural. So the children play at the park. When we've got a plural subject, then we don't have an S on the verb. All right, that's rule number one. Rule number two is when it starts to get a little bit more complicated. This is how when a clause is between the subject and verb. This will not change the verb. So when it's not as pretty as this, when there's other phrases in there, if there's only one subject and one verb, you're not going to change the verb just because there's something in the middle of it. So something like this, the child with no friends, oh, this is sad, plays at the park. So even though there's this phrase in the middle that says with no friends, you still keep the same verb tense because it's still singular. It's still just one kid, right? And it would work with children too. The children who have lots of friends play at the park, right? So you look and see what the main subject is, and you want your verb to go along with that main subject. All right. Rule number three, you use a plural verb. Plural verb looks like that. If two subjects are joined with and. So the rule is like Max and Susan, and now it's not just one person, it's two, even though it's 1 + 1, right? You still have two, so you have to say play at the park. You use the verbal, or you use the plural verb. Go fast with some of these, especially at the beginning when they're pretty basic. Okay, rule number 4. Inverted subjects must still agree with the verb. Okay, this one gets a little bit, I'm having a really hard time writing today. This one gets a little bit more complicated. So when you invert a subject, that is when you change up the normal order of a sentence. The normal order of a sentence goes subject, verb, object. So something like Karen argues with the clerk. It started with Karen and then they had to make it work. You have a subject, you got a verb, and then you have the object, the person that she is arguing with. right? That's the normal order of things, but you can flip that in English. You can say, with the clerk, Karen argues. You can flip stuff because it sounds weird, but like we are allowed to kind of change up some word order. So this normal one is subject, verb, object. And even if you change that up, you still need to make sure that your subject and your verb agrees. So something like, there is a child at the park versus there are 5 children at the park. So even though you haven't started with your subject is still the one acting here. They are being at the park, and so you still need it to match with your verb. So even if things are out of order, still need to make sure that the subject matches with the verb. Okay, now this last one is the one where most people actually don't know this rule. So this last one is very useful, especially for like ACT type things. I'm gonna put it over here. My last board space, number 5 here. All right, so if there are 2 or more subjects joined with or, so the other one was and. If they are joined with or, use the closest to the verb to determine agreement. Okay, so this probably, I'll have family members that call me up for grammar rules all the time, like as they're writing things. This is the one that I think like people are the most confused on for agreement. So it's like either Jack, oh, we have a Jack in this class. How fun. Or the children. And you have to determine which verb to use. Let's say we're going to say that they are playing at the park. Either Jack plays at the park, right? Or the children play at the park. So the way that you determine is because they're different, because there's a singular and a plural there, and you're using the word or, you're just going to determine it by the word that is closest to the verb. So would it be play or plays? Play. Yep. And those are the agreement rules. There's a few others that are a little like, I don't know, uncommon. So these are the 5 really common ones. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, awesome. I want you to correct sentences 1 and 2 then on the next page.